Welcome to this science first and safety first breakdown of Yohimbine and fasted cardio. This topic gets a lot of attention because the claims sound simple and tempting. Take Yohimbine on an empty stomach, do cardio, and unlock stubborn fat. But the real story is more complicated. In this presentation, we will separate mechanism from real-world results, and we will pay close attention to risk. Yohimbine is not just another mild pre-workout ingredient. It can influence the nervous system, heart rate, blood pressure, anxiety, sleep, and overall stimulant load. Fasted cardio also needs to be understood properly. Burning more fat during a workout is not the same thing as losing more body fat over weeks. The goal here is to give you a practical, honest, and balanced explanation so you can decide whether this strategy is worth considering or whether safer fundamentals are the better route. This slide introduces the hook that drives the entire discussion. The marketing claim is easy to understand. If you train on an empty stomach, insulin is lower, fat use during exercise may be higher, and Yohimbine may help mobilize stubborn fat. That sounds like a powerful combination, but the AO reality check is that a plausible mechanism is not the same as a proven body composition result. A supplement can increase fat mobilization temporarily, without meaningfully changing how much body fat you lose over time. The other part of the equation is risk. Yohimbine can cause anxiety, restlessness, heart rate elevation, blood pressure changes, and sleep problems in some people. So the real question is not just whether Yohimbine can influence fat metabolism. The real question is whether the potential benefit is meaningful enough to justify the risk for most lifters and athletes. This slide frames the three main categories we need to separate. First, there is what gets hyped: fasted fat oxidation, alpha-2 receptor blockade, and claims about stubborn fat. These ideas sound scientific, and they are often used to sell fat burners. Second, there's what actually matters: long-term fat loss, training consistency, health, and whether you can sustain your habits. Third, there is the risk profile, including anxiety, blood pressure concerns, and label uncertainty. When supplement marketing focuses only on the mechanism, it leaves out the bigger picture. A substance can increase fat oxidation during one session and still fail to improve fat loss across several weeks. Likewise, a supplement can feel powerful because it stimulates the nervous system, but that feeling may not equal better progress. Our job is to look at all three dimensions together: mechanism, results, and risk. Fasted cardio can increase fat oxidation during the workout. That means your body may use a higher proportion of fat as fuel during that specific session compared with fed exercise. But this is only an acute snapshot. It tells us what fuel your body is using in the moment, not what happens to your body composition across the week or month. If you burn more fat during the workout, but compensate by eating more later, moving less, or training with lower intensity, the long-term fat loss result may not improve. This is where many people get misled. Fat oxidation is not the same as fat loss. The body constantly shifts between using carbohydrates and fats, depending on food intake, training intensity, sleep, hormones, and total energy balance. Fasted cardio can be a tool, but it is not a magic fat loss switch. This slide highlights one of the most important distinctions in the entire presentation. During a fasted workout, fat use may be higher than during a fed workout. That can make fasted cardio look superior if we focus only on the workout window. But long-term fat loss depends on energy balance over time. If total calories, protein, resistance training, and daily activity are the same, the difference between fasted and fed cardio often becomes much less meaningful. Think of acute fat burning as a moment in time, while fat loss is the outcome of many repeated behaviors across weeks. A workout can burn fat during the session without necessarily producing more body fat loss by the end of the month. This is why supplement claims based only on acute fuel use need to be treated cautiously. This slide brings us back to the fundamentals. Fasted cardio may shift the fuel mix during the workout, but the weekly result is still driven by calorie intake, protein intake, training quality, sleep, and overall consistency. A supplement cannot override poor fundamentals. If someone is not in a sustainable calorie deficit, Yohimbine will not solve that. If protein intake is too low, muscle retention can suffer. If sleep is poor, hunger, recovery, motivation, and training performance can all decline. If resistance training is inconsistent, the body composition outcome will not be ideal. Yohimbine and fasted cardio may sound like an advanced strategy, but advanced strategies are only useful after the basics are already working. For most people, the basics provide far more benefit and far less risk. This myth versus fact slide helps correct common misunderstandings. The first myth is that fasted cardio guarantees more fat loss. The fact is that higher fat use during the session does not automatically mean more body fat lost over time. The second myth is that the fuel source used during exercise determines body composition. In reality, weekly energy balance matters more. The third myth is that adding Yohimbine solves the problem. The fact is that Yohimbine evidence is limited and the risk profile is meaningful. This does not mean fasted cardio is useless. Some people prefer it because it fits their schedule, digestion, or appetite patterns. But preference is different from physiological superiority. The goal is to choose strategies you can perform consistently without adding unnecessary health risks. Yohimbine is an alkaloid associated with yohimbine bark. Yohimbine bark itself contains many alkaloids, so it is not the same thing as pure yohimbine. This distinction matters because supplement labels can be confusing. One product may list yohimbine bark extract, another may list yohimbine hydrochloride, and another may hide it inside a proprietary blend. These are not identical from a dosing or safety standpoint. Synthetic yohimbine hydrochloride is more specific, while bark extracts can contain a broader mix of compounds. Yohimbine is often marketed for fat loss, energy, and pre-workout stimulation, but it is not a casual ingredient. It acts on systems involved in stress response, and that is why it can feel intense for some users. Understanding what the ingredient actually is helps us understand both the fat loss theory and the safety concerns. The main fat-burning theory behind yohimbine involves alpha-2 adrenergic receptors. These receptors can act like brakes on norepinephrine signaling. Yohimbine is described as an alpha-2 receptor antagonist, meaning it blocks those brakes. In theory, blocking these receptors can increase norepinephrine signaling, which may support lipolysis or the mobilization of stored fat. This is the biochemical idea behind many stubborn fat claims. But we need to be careful. A receptor mechanism can be plausible without producing a meaningful real-world change in body composition. The body regulates fat storage and fat use through many systems, and one pathway does not override calorie balance, training, sleep, and recovery. So this mechanism helps explain why yohimbine became popular, but it does not prove that it reliably works for most people. This slide simplifies the pathway. Yohimbine may increase norepinephrine. Norepinephrine may increase lipolysis, and lipolysis means fat is mobilized from storage. That pathway is real enough to be scientifically interesting. But the important distinction is that lipolysis is not the same as fat loss. Lipolysis means fat is released into the bloodstream. For body fat to actually decrease over time, that mobilized fat must be oxidized and not simply restored later. If total calorie intake and expenditure do not support fat loss, increased mobilization will not produce a meaningful body composition change. This is where supplement marketing often jumps too far. It takes a short-term metabolic marker and treats it as if it guarantees visible fat loss. In practice, the result depends on the full daily and weekly energy balance. Fasting is claimed to matter because insulin tends to be lower after an overnight fast, and lower insulin can shift the body toward greater fat use during exercise. The theory is that yohimbine may work better in this low insulin environment because fat mobilization is less restricted. On paper, this combination sounds logical. Low insulin plus yohimbine equals more fat mobilization. But again, long-term outcomes still depend on total energy balance. If you do fasted cardio with yohimbine but overeat later in the day, the fat loss advantage disappears. If the stimulant makes you anxious, disrupts sleep, or reduces training quality, it may even backfire. The fasting context may help explain why people pair yohimbine with cardio, but it does not remove the need for consistent nutrition, training, and recovery. When we look at human evidence, the case for yohimbine as a reliable fat loss supplement is weak. Some findings are interesting, but the studies are small, limited, and difficult to generalize. There is no strong evidence showing that yohimbine reliably produces meaningful fat loss for most lifters. The same is true for performance. A few studies show small signals in certain tasks, but those findings are not consistent enough to justify broad claims. This is important because supplement marketing often presents yohimbine as if it is a proven stubborn fat solution. The reality is more cautious. The mechanism is plausible, but the direct human evidence is not strong enough to support confident recommendations. Any discussion of yohimbine must also consider the risk profile, which is more serious than with many common supplements. One of the most cited human studies involved 20 male soccer players who took 20 milligrams of yohimbine per day. For 21 days, their body fat percentage decreased in the yohimbine group, but performance indicators did not improve. This result is often used to support yohimbine marketing, but it needs context. The sample was small, the participants were trained male soccer players, and the study was short. That makes it difficult to apply the findings to the average lifter, beginner, or general fitness audience. It also does not prove that Yohimbine specifically targets stubborn fat, or that it provides a safe, repeatable fat loss advantage. The takeaway is not that the study is meaningless. Rather, it is that one small athlete trial is not enough to call Yohimbine a proven fat burner. This slide gives a reality check from a safety-oriented perspective. The evidence is not sufficient to say that Yohimbine or Yohimbine supplements reliably support weight loss. Research on athletic performance is also limited and inconsistent. That matters because Yohimbine is not a low-risk ingredient. If the benefit is uncertain but the side effect profile is meaningful, the threshold for recommending it should be high. A supplement with possible anxiety, blood pressure, heart rate, and sleep effects should not be treated as a casual add-on. Before using a higher-risk stimulant, we should demand stronger evidence than just a mechanism and a few small trials. The honest conclusion is that the evidence does not justify broad use for most people. This slide organizes the evidence into tiers. The mechanistic tier is the strongest part of the Yohimbine argument. Alpha-2 receptor blockade and norepinephrine signaling are plausible. The fat loss tier is limited because human studies are thin and inconsistent. The fasted cardio tier is also limited because fasted cardio may increase fat oxidation during a session but does not clearly improve long-term fat loss. The high caution tier is important because anxiety, heart rate, blood pressure, and label risk are meaningful. Evidence tiering helps us avoid overreacting to any one piece of information. Mechanism alone does not make an ingredient worth using. The practical question is whether the likely benefit outweighs the likely downside, and for Yohimbine, the caution tier is too important to ignore. Stubborn fat marketing often takes a small piece of physiology and stretches it into a big promise. The claim usually goes like this: stubborn fat areas have more alpha-2 receptors. Yohimbine blocks alpha-2 receptors. Therefore, Yohimbine targets stubborn fat. That explanation sounds neat, but the evidence does not prove targeted fat loss. Body fat loss is systemic, not a precise spot reduction process that a supplement can control. Acute fat mobilization from a certain area does not guarantee visible body composition change. If you are not in a calorie deficit, mobilized fat can be restored. If the supplement disrupts sleep or training, it can undermine progress. This slide is a reminder to use restraint. Yohimbine may have an interesting mechanism, but the stubborn fat claims are often oversold. Yohimbine is not simply strong caffeine. It works through different pathways and can raise sympathetic nervous system activity in a way that feels intense. In sensitive users, that can feel like anxiety, panic, nervous arousal, or cardiovascular strain. This makes Yohimbine different from many common fat loss supplements or basic pre-workout ingredients. The risk is not just feeling a little energized. It can involve an uncomfortable or frightening stress response. That is especially important for people with anxiety history, high stress sensitivity, blood pressure concerns, or stimulant sensitivity. When a supplement can activate the body's fight or flight system, it deserves serious caution. The fat loss upside must be very clear to justify that level of risk, and in the case of Yohimbine, the evidence is not strong enough for most users. This slide focuses on one of the most common concerns: anxiety and restlessness. Yohimbine can produce nervous arousal, and in sensitive users it may trigger panic-like symptoms. For someone who is already prone to anxiety, this can be more than an inconvenience. It can make a workout feel unbearable and may cause lingering stress after training. A fat loss supplement is not worth feeling like your nervous system is under attack. If a product makes you feel panicked, shaky, or mentally overwhelmed, that is not a sign that it is working better. It is a sign that the risk is too high. This is especially relevant for fasted cardio, because training on an empty stomach can already feel physically stressful for some people. Adding Yohimbine may push that stress too far. Yohimbine may increase heart rate and blood pressure, and that risk can rise when it is combined with caffeine or other stimulants. This is especially concerning during cardio, when heart rate is already elevated from exercise. High stimulant fasted cardio can become a poor trade-off because you are stacking several stressors at once: fasting, exercise, sympathetic activation, and possibly caffeine. For healthy users, this may feel like extra intensity. For sensitive users, it can feel like palpitations, dizziness, or blood pressure symptoms. This slide emphasizes that heart rate and blood pressure are not abstract numbers. They are real safety signals. If your goal is fat loss, there are far safer ways to create a calorie deficit and improve fitness than pushing your cardiovascular system with a high stimulus strategy. Yohimbine can cause restlessness and insomnia in some users. That matters because sleep and recovery are major drivers of body composition and training progress. A supplement that slightly increases fat mobilization during a workout but ruins sleep may ultimately slow your progress. Poor sleep can increase hunger, reduce insulin sensitivity, lower training readiness, worsen mood, and reduce recovery. If you feel wired, restless, or unable to sleep after taking a stimulant, the supposed fat loss edge may disappear. This is where the risk to reward ratio becomes practical. A supplement should support your training plan, not sabotage the basics. If Yohimbine disrupts recovery, increases anxiety, or makes the next day's workout worse, it is not helping you reach your goal. This slide addresses the more serious safety concerns. Reports and safety resources have associated Yohimbine with blood pressure problems, arrhythmias, heart attacks, and seizures. That does not mean every user will experience these outcomes, and it does not mean a single low dose will automatically cause harm. But the existence of these associations changes the conversation. Yohimbine is not in the same category as creatine protein powder or a basic electrolyte product. Its risk profile is too serious for casual use, especially in multi-stimulant formulas. If an ingredient has limited evidence for benefit but a meaningful record of serious adverse effects, the burden of proof should be high. For most lifters, that burden has not been met. Labeling is a major problem with Yohimbine and Yohimbine products. Yohimbine bark extract may not equal standardized Yohimbine. Products can contain variable amounts of Yohimbine, and some may include undisclosed co-alkaloids that change the real stimulant exposure. This means two products with similar labels can produce very different effects. One may be underdosed, while another may deliver more than expected and increase side effect risk. This uncertainty is especially concerning for an ingredient with a narrow risk to reward profile. If you cannot verify the exact dose, you cannot responsibly manage the risk. Third-party testing can reduce uncertainty, but it does not make Yohimbine risk-free. The best protection is to avoid vague labels, proprietary blends, and products that do not disclose exact ingredient amounts. Many fat burners combine Yohimbine with caffeine or other stimulants to create a stronger perceived effect. This is often marketed as a more powerful thermogenic or energy formula. However, stacking raises heart rate and cardiovascular risk. It can also intensify anxiety, restlessness, nausea, and sleep disruption. Multi-stimulant products should not be treated as beginner-friendly. The problem is that users may not realize how many stimulants they are taking because ingredients are split across different sections of the label or hidden behind proprietary blend names. If a formula contains Yohimbine plus caffeine, synephrine, ralvolcine, or other stimulants, the risk increases. The body responds to total stimulant exposure, not to marketing categories. For most users, the safer move is to avoid combining Yohimbine with other stimulants entirely. This slide gives a practical label audit framework. First, determine whether the product contains Yohimbine hydrochloride or Yohimbine bark extract. The compound form is more predictable, while bark extract can contain a broader alkaloid mixture. Second, check whether the exact Yohimbine amount is shown. If the dose is hidden, the risk is hidden. Third, look for other stimulants such as caffeine, synephrine, ralvolcine, or ephedrine-like compounds. These increase heart rate and blood pressure risk. Fourth, see whether the product is third-party tested. Testing can reduce uncertainty, but it does not remove the inherent risk of Yohimbine itself. If a product fails these checks, it is a red flag. Serious lifters should value transparency over aggressive stimulant claims. Certain people should avoid Yohimbine entirely. This includes anyone with anxiety or panic disorders, post-traumatic stress disorder, or high-stress sensitivity. It also includes people with high blood pressure, heart rhythm issues, or cardiovascular disease. Pregnant or breastfeeding individuals should avoid it, as should people with stimulant sensitivity or medications that may interact with adrenergic compounds. Anyone using antidepressants, blood pressure medication, or other stimulants should be especially cautious. Yohimbine can amplify the body's stress response, and for these groups, the downside can be significant. This is not an ingredient where everyone should just try a small amount. If you fall into one of these categories, the safest approach is to skip it and focus on lower-risk fat loss strategies. This slide is a direct safety reminder. The information in this presentation is educational only and should not be treated as medical advice. Yohimbine should not be stacked with high-stimulant pre-workouts. If you have cardiovascular concerns, blood pressure issues, anxiety, pregnancy, medication use, kidney concerns, liver concerns, or heart concerns, avoid Yohimbine unless you are medically cleared by a qualified professional. There is also a simple safety rule. If you feel palpitations, panic, severe nausea, or symptoms that suggest blood pressure problems, stop immediately and seek care. Supplements are optional tools, not necessities. If the tool causes intense stress or danger, it has no place in a responsible training plan. This slide shifts the conversation from risky shortcuts to proven fundamentals. A sustainable calorie deficit is the primary driver of fat loss. Protein intake helps preserve muscle, control appetite, and support recovery. Lifting weights signals the body to retain lean mass while losing fat. Steps and daily movement help increase energy expenditure without relying on stimulants. Sleep supports hormones, recovery, mood, and hunger regulation. Supplements should only come after these basics are consistent. If you are not tracking food intake, not lifting consistently, not sleeping enough, and not staying active, Yohimbine is not the missing piece. The boring fundamentals work better, last longer, and carry far less risk. This is the framework most lifters should prioritize. His slide summarizes the potential upside and downside. On the upside, Yohimbine has a plausible lipolysis mechanism, a small athlete study signal, the theoretical fasted cardio fuel shift, and possible extra fat mobilization. But the downside is substantial. Anxiety, panic-like symptoms, higher heart rate, blood pressure concerns, label variability, stacking risk, and evidence that is too limited for most lifters. When these points are compared directly, the risk side is much stronger. A plausible mechanism is not enough when the real-world evidence is weak, and the safety profile is meaningful. The question is not whether Yohimbine can do anything. The question is whether it does enough to justify the risk. For many lifters, the answer is no. The final verdict is balanced but cautious. The mechanism behind Yohimbine and fasted cardio is plausible. The evidence for meaningful fat loss is limited. The risks are meaningful, especially for anxiety-prone users, people with blood pressure concerns, and anyone stacking stimulants. For many lifters, the trade-off is not worth it. Yohimbine may sound like a fasted cardio hack, but a hack is only useful if it improves results without creating bigger problems. If it disrupts sleep, worsens anxiety, raises heart rate, or creates label uncertainty, it is not a good tool. The safest and most effective fat loss plan still comes down to calorie control, protein, resistance training, daily movement, sleep, and consistency. Yohimbine should be viewed as a high-caution ingredient, not a default fat loss strategy.